Virgin girl whispered, "I can cook." The mountain man pulled her close and said, "Stay, I need you." The young woman had always felt that life in the city was too loud, too crowded, and too fast for her quiet heart. Every morning, the streets filled with cars and shouting people seemed to push her further into herself. She had grown tired of endless noise, the constant rush, and the sense that no one truly saw her. Her apartment, small and filled with the hum of machines, felt like a cage. Sometimes she would sit by the window and watch the city moving like a river of lights and sounds, and she would think, there has to be more to life than this. One evening, after another long day at a job that left her exhausted and unfulfilled, she made a decision. She would leave the city. She would find a place far away, where the air was fresh, the nights were quiet, and where she could feel the earth under her feet. She wanted a simple life, one where she could take care of herself, grow stronger, and maybe even discover something she had lost in the city: peace. She had heard of a remote village deep in the mountains. People said it was quiet, almost untouched by time, and that the few villagers who lived there were hard-working and simple. There were no factories, no noisy streets, no rush to keep up with anything. It sounded perfect, and though she had never met anyone from there, she felt drawn to the idea of living among people who valued nature, honesty, and simple daily life. Packing a small bag, she left behind her city life. She took only what she thought she might need: a few clothes, some cooking tools, a notebook to write her thoughts, and a small blanket. As the bus took her away from the city, she watched skyscrapers disappear behind hills and valleys, replaced by green forests and winding roads. With each mile, her heart felt lighter. She had no idea what awaited her, but the thought of peace and quiet made her smile for the first time in months. After a long journey, she arrived at the village just as the sun began to dip behind the mountains. The village was smaller than she imagined, with only a few scattered homes built of wood and stone. Smoke rose from chimneys carrying the faint smell of cooking fires. Chickens wandered freely in yards, and the distant sound of a river filled the air. It was peaceful, and yet it felt alive in its own quiet way. She walked along the narrow paths, unsure where to go first. Villagers looked at her curiously, but not unkindly. Their eyes were cautious but gentle, as if strangers rarely visited, yet they wanted no trouble. She realized she would need to find someone willing to take her in, someone who could trust her enough to let her stay. That evening, she found her way to a small wooden house at the edge of the village. The house seemed older than the others, built of dark timber and surrounded by tall pine trees. A small garden grew vegetables and herbs, cared for but not perfect. The smell of fresh earth and green plants was welcoming. She knocked gently at the door. The door opened slowly, and a man appeared. He was tall and strong, with broad shoulders and hands that looked as though they had worked hard for years. His hair was dark and slightly unkempt, and his eyes were sharp, observing her with interest. He did not speak immediately, simply studying her for a moment. There was something different about him, serious, quiet, and yet kind. I'm looking for work," she said softly. "I can cook, clean, and help around the house. I just want to stay somewhere peaceful." Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to sound confident. The man did not answer at once. He looked at her from head to toe, then back to her face, as if trying to understand what kind of person she was. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "What do you know about life here?" "I don't know much," she admitted. "I've only lived in the city. But I can work hard. I want to learn." I want to live quietly, help someone, and have a simple life." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
Very well. If you are serious, you can stay.
"But you will have to work. Life here is not easy." She nodded eagerly. "I understand. I can do it." He stepped aside and motioned for her to enter. The house smelled of wood smoke and herbs. It was simple, with a small kitchen, a few pieces of furniture, and a fireplace that seemed to dominate the room. The man moved with calm efficiency, preparing a small space for her to rest. It felt like a real home, not the sterile apartments of the city. The next morning, she woke to the sounds of birds and a cool breeze through the open window. She followed him outside, where the tasks of the day awaited. There was a small garden to tend, a fire to light, and vegetables to prepare for cooking. She worked with care, trying to remember the few things her mother had taught her in the kitchen long ago. At first, it was difficult. The sun was stronger than she expected. The tasks were more tiring than she imagined, and the air was thinner at this high altitude. But the man was patient, guiding her without rushing or yelling. He showed her how to carry water from the stream, how to chop vegetables efficiently, and how to tend the small fire without letting it burn out. Slowly, she began to learn the rhythm of mountain life. Over the days, they began to speak more. She told him about her life in the city, the noise, the loneliness, and the feeling of being invisible in a crowd. He listened quietly, offering small smiles or nods, never interrupting. Sometimes he shared bits of his own story, of living alone in the mountains, of learning to rely on himself, and of the quiet joys of the land. There was a calmness in his presence that she hadn't felt in years. She noticed small things, the way he smiled when the sun hit the mountains just right, how carefully he treated the animals, how he valued honesty above all. She began to respect him, not just as someone who had offered her shelter, but as someone who had lived a life she had only dreamed of. One afternoon, while preparing a meal together, she quietly said, "I can cook. I know I'm not perfect, but I want to help." Her voice was barely above a whisper, almost shy. The man stopped what he was doing and looked at her. For a moment he just stared, and then a small smile appeared on his face. "Good," he said simply. "I need you." She blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected those words, but somehow hearing them made her feel that she had found a place where she belonged, not just in the mountains, but in his life, in this quiet corner of the world. As the days turned into weeks, she continued to learn, to work, and to grow. She discovered that the mountains, though harsh, were also beautiful. The air was fresh, the rivers clear, and the nights filled with stars she had never seen in the city. And with each passing day, she felt more at home, not just in the village, but in a life that felt real, meaningful, and shared with someone who cared for her as she cared for him. Even though she had arrived quietly, unsure of her place in this new world, she realized that sometimes taking a step into the unknown could lead to the most unexpected and wonderful discoveries. And in the stillness of the mountains, she began to understand what peace truly meant. The mornings in the mountains were quiet, almost magical. The sun rose slowly behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine trees and earth. The young woman had begun to wake with the first light, not because she had to, but because her body and mind had started to adjust to this new life. She felt a deep satisfaction in simply watching the world awaken, listening to the birds singing, and feeling the soft breeze on her skin. Each day brought work, and though it was tiring, it was honest and satisfying. She began to understand the rhythm of mountain life, fetching water from the stream, tending the small garden, chopping firewood, cleaning the house, and preparing simple meals. The tasks were repetitive, but she found a strange comfort in them. Unlike her old city life, where every day seemed to be a race against time, here she could focus on one thing at a time, doing it well and feeling the results of her own labor. The man, the mountain dweller who had let her stay, was always nearby. He worked alongside her, moving with quiet confidence. He did not rush her, nor did he speak unnecessarily. Sometimes he would show her how to do something with a careful hand, guiding her movements without words. Other times he would simply watch as she learned through her own effort, his eyes calm, patient, and attentive. She had never experienced such patience before, and it made her feel seen in a way she had never known. Slowly, they began to talk more. She told him small things about herself, the memories she carried from the city, and the dreams she still held. She spoke of long walks in parks she used to take, of the simple joy of a sunrise she rarely noticed in the city, and of how lonely she had felt, even in a crowded room. He listened without judgment, nodding, occasionally offering a quiet word of encouragement. "You are strong," he said one morning, as she struggled to lift a bucket of water from the stream. "It takes more strength than most people have to leave everything behind and start again." She smiled at his words, feeling warmth spread through her chest. No one had ever recognized her inner strength before. In the city, she often felt invisible, her efforts unnoticed. Here, in the mountains, her small victories mattered, and someone truly acknowledged them. At first, there had been a distance between them, a natural caution that came with meeting someone new. But each day, that distance grew smaller. He shared stories of his life in the mountains, how he had learned to survive alone, how he had built his home with his own hands, and how he had found peace in solitude. She, in turn, shared stories of her own life, carefully omitting the parts she felt might be judged. He did not press her for more than she was ready to give. Meals became their shared time. She would cook, experimenting with the simple ingredients she found in the garden and nearby forest. He would taste her dishes with quiet appreciation, offering a small nod or a satisfied smile. "This is good," he would say. "You'll learn quickly." These small exchanges became the rhythm of their days. There was no rush, no need for grand gestures. The work, the meals, and the shared silence were enough to build a bond. She began to feel a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. In the mountains, she was not just a visitor or a worker. She was becoming part of a life that had a rhythm, purpose, and meaning. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the garden, a sudden rainstorm swept through the mountains. The clouds darkened, and the wind picked up, rustling the pine trees. She froze for a moment, unsure what to do. He quickly moved to her side, grabbing a sturdy tarp and covering the vegetables they had planted. "Come here," he said. She followed him under the makeshift shelter. The rain fell heavily, drumming on the roof of the tarp. They stood close, silent except for the sound of the rain. For the first time, she felt a real sense of safety beside someone. In the city, rain had always been inconvenient, something to endure. Here, it became a shared experience, and she realized she was not afraid because he was there. As the storm passed, the air smelled of wet earth and fresh leaves. They worked together to secure the garden, laughing quietly at the small mess the rain had caused. She noticed the way his hands moved with ease and confidence, how he seemed perfectly at home in this wild, unpredictable world. She felt a mix of admiration and comfort. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day their trust grew stronger. She learned to start the fire in the fireplace without his help, to prepare meals that nourished them both, and to care for the small animals that wandered near the house. He, in turn, began to share more of himself, not just stories, but small gestures of kindness. Sometimes he would leave a cup of tea ready for her in the morning, or a small bundle of herbs for her to use in cooking. One evening, after a long day of work, she sat outside watching the sun sink behind the mountains. He joined her, carrying 2 cups of steaming tea. They sat in silence for a few moments, enjoying the colors of the sky and the calm of the evening. Then he spoke, quietly. You have changed things here, he said. The house feels warmer, the garden grows better. Even the animals seem happier. She smiled, feeling a glow of pride. I'm learning, she replied. I want to be useful. I want to help. You are, he said simply, more than you know. That night, as she prepared for bed, she reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had come to the mountains seeking peace, and she had found it in ways she had never imagined. It was not just the quiet or the beauty of nature. It was the sense of being part of something larger, of being needed and appreciated. Over the next few weeks, they developed small routines that made life smoother. She would wake early to help with breakfast. He would gather firewood, and together they would tend the garden and care for the animals. Sometimes they would walk along the nearby trails, exploring the mountains and sharing stories of the past and dreams of the future. She learned to navigate the terrain, to read the clouds for weather, and to move with caution over rocky paths. One morning, as they worked together to repair a small section of the house roof damaged by wind, she noticed how carefully he moved, always aware of her safety. She realized that he was not just a strong man. He was a careful, thoughtful person who valued life and the people around him. It was a quality she had rarely seen before, and it made her feel even more connected to him. Her confidence grew alongside her trust in him. Tasks that once seemed impossible became manageable. She learned to chop firewood efficiently, to carry heavy water buckets without spilling, and to cook meals that were hearty and nourishing. Each success, each skill learned, strengthened her sense of independence, while deepening her bond with the mountain man. One afternoon, while preparing a simple stew, she whispered softly, almost shyly, "I can cook." She looked up at him, unsure how he would respond. He paused, then gave her a small, approving smile. "Good," he said simply. "I need you." The words lingered in the air, gentle but powerful. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. In the city, no one had ever needed her in such a way, and she realized how important it was to be valued, not for appearances or achievements, but simply for who she was and what she could contribute. From that moment, she felt a deeper sense of belonging. The mountains were no longer just a place to escape. They were a home. And he was no longer just a guide or a helper. He was someone she could trust, someone whose presence made the quiet moments of life even more meaningful. As the days continued, their connection grew naturally. There was no rush, no forced closeness. They shared tasks, meals, and conversations, each moment building the foundation of trust, respect, and companionship. She realized that life in the mountains was not just about surviving. It was about learning, growing, and finding value in simplicity. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. The mountains had given her more than quiet. They had given her a sense of purpose, a sense of home, and a sense of connection that she had been searching for all her life. And as she looked at the man who had welcomed her so gently into this world, she knew that trust and companionship could grow slowly, quietly, but with a strength that could withstand any storm. Life in the mountains continued to move at its own slow and steady pace. By now, the young woman no longer felt like a stranger. Her hands had grown stronger, her steps more confident, and her heart calmer. Each morning she rose with the sun, feeling grateful for the quiet that surrounded her. The cold air no longer shocked her. Instead, it refreshed her. She wrapped herself in a warm shawl, stepped outside, and breathed deeply, feeling alive in a way she never had before. The man noticed the change in her. She moved with more confidence now, understanding the rhythm of the land. She knew when to water the garden, how to prepare food with care, and how to manage the fire without struggle. He no longer had to guide her through every task. Instead, they worked side by side as equals, sharing responsibility without needing many words. Their conversations became deeper, though still gentle. In the evenings, after work was done, they often sat near the fire. The flames danced softly, casting warm light across the wooden walls. Sometimes they talked about small things, weather, animals, the garden. Other times silence filled the room, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt shared, understood. One evening she spoke about her past more openly than before. She talked about how she often felt overlooked in the city, how people were always busy, always rushing. "I felt like I didn't matter," she said quietly, staring into the fire, "like I could disappear and no one would notice." He listened carefully, his expression serious but kind. After a moment, he said, "You matter here." His voice was calm but certain. Every day, her eyes filled slightly, but she smiled. Those simple words meant more to her than long speeches ever could. As the days passed, the weather began to change. Clouds gathered more often, and the wind grew stronger. The man warned her that storms were common this time of year. "The mountains can be harsh," he said, "but if we prepare, we'll be fine." They worked together to secure the house. They checked the roof, stored extra food, and gathered more firewood. She followed his instructions carefully, trusting his experience. The work was tiring, but she felt proud to be part of it. She was no longer just being helped. She was helping. One afternoon, as they carried firewood back to the house, dark clouds rolled in faster than expected. Thunder echoed through the valley. She hesitated, looking at the sky. He noticed immediately. "We need to get inside," he said firmly. As they hurried back, rain began to fall, heavy and cold. The path grew slippery, and she lost her footing for a moment. He reached out quickly, steadying her before she could fall. His grip was strong, but gentle, meant only to protect. She looked up at him, startled, then relieved. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "Thank you." They made it inside just as the storm fully arrived. Rain poured down and wind howled against the walls. The house creaked, but it held strong. He added wood to the fire, and soon the room was filled with warmth and light. She sat near the fire, wrapping herself in a blanket. Her hands trembled slightly, not just from the cold, but from the intensity of the storm. He noticed and brought her a warm drink. "Storms can sound frightening," he said, "but they pass." She nodded, sipping slowly. "I've never experienced anything like this," she admitted. In the city, storms were just noise. Here, they feel powerful. "They remind us how small we are," he said, "and how important it is to take care of each other." Those words stayed with her. That night, the storm continued long after darkness fell. The wind rattled the windows and rain beat against the roof. She found it hard to sleep. Sensing this, he stayed awake as well, sitting by the fire to keep it going. At one point, She stepped into the room quietly. "You should rest," she said. "I can watch the fire." He shook his head. "We'll do it together." They sat near the fire, sharing the quiet moments between the sounds of the storm. She realized then how much trust she felt in him. Not once had she felt unsafe or unsure since coming here. That trust had grown slowly, naturally, built from shared work, shared silence, and shared care. In the days that followed, the storm left its mark on the land. Fallen branches lay scattered, and the river ran higher than before. Together they checked the garden and repaired small damages around the house. She worked without complaint, determined to help restore what the storm had disturbed. "You've become very strong," he said one morning as they worked, "not just in body, but in spirit." She smiled. "I learned from you." He paused, then replied, "You remind me why this life matters." That simple exchange brought them closer than either expected. As their bond deepened, she began to notice small details about him. The way he paused to watch the sunset, how gently he treated animals, and how he valued honesty above all else. She realized he was not just someone who lived in the mountains. He was someone shaped by them, patient and steady, like the land itself. One evening, while preparing food, she made a small mistake and burned part of the meal. She immediately apologized, worried she had disappointed him. He tasted it, smiled slightly, and said, "It's fine. Mistakes happen. What matters is that you try." Her shoulders relaxed. In the past, mistakes had always felt like failures. Here, they were simply lessons. Later that night, as they sat outside under a clear sky filled with stars, she spoke softly. "I never thought I could live like this. I never thought I could feel calm." He looked at the sky, then at her. "Neither did I," he admitted. "Not until you came." The words were simple, but they carried deep meaning. She felt her heart warm, understanding that their lives had changed each other in quiet but important ways. Days turned into weeks, and their connection grew stronger. There was still respect, still space, but also a deep understanding. They anticipated each other's needs without speaking. If she looked tired, he would take on more work. If he seemed burdened, she would quietly offer help. One afternoon, while she prepared a meal, she spoke softly, almost to herself. "I'm glad I came here." He looked at her and replied without hesitation, "So am I." In that moment, she understood that their bond was built not on words or promises, but on shared effort, trust, and care. They had faced storms, fatigue, and uncertainty together, and each challenge had only brought them closer. As the mountain air cooled and the days grew shorter, she felt secure, rooted, and valued. The mountains were no longer just a place of escape. They were a place of growth. And the man beside her was no longer just someone who had offered shelter. He was someone who shared her journey, step by step, quietly and sincerely. She knew that more challenges would come. Life in the mountains was never easy, but she also knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, with patience, respect, and a bond strong enough to endure the harshest winds. And for the first time in her life, that knowledge gave her true peace. The change in the season came slowly but clearly. The air grew colder, and the mornings carried a sharp bite that reminded them winter was near. Frost appeared on the grass, and the mountains seemed taller and more serious under pale skies. The young woman noticed how the land demanded more effort now. Tasks took longer, and mistakes could no longer be ignored. Life was becoming harder, but she did not feel afraid. Instead, she felt determined. The man prepared for winter with great care. He checked the house, reinforced weak parts, and stored food. He showed her how to dry vegetables, how to keep supplies safe, and how to manage resources wisely. She listened carefully, understanding that survival now depended on preparation and teamwork. Despite her growing confidence, doubts sometimes crept into her mind. Late at night, when the wind howled outside and the fire burned low, she wondered if she truly belonged here. The mountains were beautiful, but they were also unforgiving. She asked herself if she was strong enough to face what was coming. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she finally spoke her thoughts. "What if I'm not ready?" she asked quietly. "What if winter is too much for me?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Fear is normal. It means you care. But you've already proven you can survive here." She nodded, but the worry did not fully leave her. As winter approached, an unexpected challenge arrived. A message reached the village from the outside world. Someone from her past had asked about her. The villagers mentioned it casually, not knowing how deeply it affected her. The news stirred old memories of the city, of the life she left behind, and of a world that once felt familiar. That night, she lay awake, thinking. Part of her wondered if she should return, even briefly, to face what she had left unresolved. The thought made her chest feel heavy. She did not want to leave the mountains. She did not want to leave him. But she also feared running from her past forever. The next morning, she told him everything. She spoke honestly, her voice steady but emotional. "Someone from my old life is looking for me. I don't know what to do." He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said quietly, "You should choose what brings you peace, not what others expect." "But what if leaving changes everything?" she asked. He did not answer right away. Instead, he said, "Whatever you decide, I will respect it." His calm response surprised her. She had expected fear or anger, but instead, he offered understanding. That made the choice even harder. Over the next few days, tension filled the air. They continued working, but silence followed them. Not an angry silence, but a thoughtful one. Each of them was afraid, she of leaving, and he of losing the quiet balance they had built together. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, a sudden accident happened. A heavy branch fell unexpectedly, narrowly missing her. She froze in shock. He rushed to her side immediately, checking her carefully. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "I'm fine," she said, though her hands shook. That moment changed something. She realized how deeply he cared, not through words, but through action. And he realized how fragile life could be, how quickly things could change. That evening he spoke openly for the first time about his fear. "I've lived alone for a long time," he said. "I learned not to need anyone, but now the thought of you leaving is hard." Her eyes filled with emotion. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "I'm just afraid of choosing wrong." "There is no wrong choice," he replied. "Only honest ones." The days grew colder and snow finally arrived. The first snowfall was quiet and gentle, covering the world in white. She stepped outside, amazed by its beauty. The mountains stood silent and strong, as if watching over them. As winter settled in, life became more demanding. Water had to be carried carefully, fires had to be kept burning, and food had to be rationed. They relied on each other more than ever. She learned to stay calm under pressure, and he learned to accept help without hesitation. One night, a strong windstorm struck. Snow piled against the house. and the cold pressed in. They worked together to keep the fire going, taking turns resting. Exhausted but focused, they moved as a team, understanding each other without words. At one point, she sat near the fire, wrapped in blankets, feeling the weight of everything she had been carrying. He sat nearby, watching the flames. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. He looked at her and said, "So am I. But we're here, together." Those words stayed with her. In the following days, she made her decision. She realized that running back to her old life would not bring peace. It would only reopen wounds she had already healed. The mountains had changed her. This life had shaped her into someone stronger, calmer, and more sure of herself. One morning, she told him, "I'm staying." He did not react right away. Then he let out a slow breath and nodded. "I hoped you would," he said honestly. "I needed to choose this," she said. "Not because of fear, but because this feels right." From that moment, something settled between them. The uncertainty faded, replaced by quiet confidence. They did not speak of the future in big terms. They did not make promises. But they continued working side by side, facing each day with renewed trust. Winter tested them again and again, but each challenge strengthened their bond. They shared laughter over small victories, warmth over shared meals, and comfort during long, cold nights. She realized that belonging was not about a place alone. It was about being seen, valued, and supported. And he realized that strength did not come from isolation, but from sharing life with someone who truly understood him. As the winter deepened, the house stood strong against the cold. Inside, warmth filled the space, not just from the fire, but from the connection they had built through patience, honesty, and care. Whatever the future held, they were no longer facing it alone. And in the heart of the mountains, surrounded by silence and snow, they had found something rare and powerful, a quiet commitment built on trust, respect, and shared resilience. Spring slowly returned to the mountains, bringing with it the soft green of new grass and the delicate scent of blooming flowers. The long winter had been hard, but it had also strengthened both of them in ways they could not have imagined. The young woman now moved with confidence and ease, knowing the rhythms of the land, understanding the subtle signs of weather, and feeling the strength that came from months of hard work. She no longer feared the harshness of the mountains. Instead, she embraced it. Every challenge, every difficult task, every early morning spent fetching water or tending the fire had taught her patience, resilience, and the value of persistence. The mountains no longer felt intimidating. They felt alive, full of lessons, and deeply connected to her own growth. The man noticed these changes with quiet satisfaction. He watched her work, noting how carefully she carried supplies, how skillfully she handled the animals, and how naturally she moved through the small tasks that once seemed overwhelming. He saw her confidence and admired it. More than that, he felt grateful for her presence, for the companionship she had offered him when he had thought he could live alone forever. Their days were now filled with routines that were both simple and deeply meaningful. Each morning they would wake before the sun and work together. She would prepare breakfast, sometimes experimenting with the vegetables from their garden, while he tended to the fire and prepared for the day's tasks. They would then walk together to check on the surrounding forest, gather firewood, or repair fences and other parts of the house. Every chore was an opportunity to work together, to share effort and care, and to enjoy the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent. Mealtimes had become moments of connection. She learned to cook hearty, nourishing dishes that filled them both with warmth and energy. He would taste the food with appreciation, offering quiet praise that felt more meaningful than any grand gesture. Sometimes they would sit outside, eating as the sun rose over the mountains, the light illuminating their small home and the valley beyond. It was a peaceful, almost magical time, and they cherished it. One afternoon, she discovered a new skill, working with the small animals that wandered near their home. She learned to care for them gently, feeding them and ensuring they were safe from the cold. He watched with pride as she approached each task with patience and care. "You've learned quickly," he said, a rare smile appearing on his face. "You understand life here now." She blushed slightly but felt a warm pride. It was no longer about proving herself. She had already found her place. But hearing it from him, someone who had lived in these mountains for years, made the accomplishment feel complete. Their companionship grew stronger each day, built on shared work, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. There were still moments of silence, but they were no longer empty or awkward. Silence had become a language of its own, a way to communicate without words, to share thoughts, feelings, and trust. One evening, after a long day, they sat outside as the sky turned shades of orange and pink. The air was warm from the sun, and the breeze carried the faint scent of pine and wildflowers. She looked at the mountains stretching endlessly before them, feeling a deep sense of peace.
"I never thought life could feel like this," she said softly.
So quiet, so real. He nodded. "It is not easy," he said. "But it is honest, and that makes it worth everything." She smiled. "I feel I belong here, and not just in this place, but with you." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached out, gently taking her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried all the meaning of months spent working, learning, and trusting each other. "I feel the same," he said. From that moment, their bond was clear to both of them. There was no need for grand declarations or promises. Their lives were already intertwined in the quiet, steady rhythm of the mountains. Every task, every meal, every shared sunrise or sunset had built a foundation stronger than words could ever express. As the weeks passed, they continued to grow together. She learned more advanced skills, repairing tools, making small improvements to the house, and navigating the surrounding forest safely. He guided her patiently, never rushing, always allowing her to learn through experience. She felt a deep pride in her abilities, and he felt a quiet joy in watching her succeed. Their evenings became moments of reflection. Sometimes they would sit by the fire, sharing stories of the past or imagining what the future might bring. Other times they simply sat in silence, listening to the wind through the trees and the distant call of birds. Each day reinforced their connection, a steady reminder that life was better when shared with someone who understood and valued you. One day, as they walked along a nearby trail, she noticed the river running higher than usual, fed by melting snow from the mountains. "The mountains are always changing," she said thoughtfully. "It reminds me that we must keep adapting too." He smiled. "Yes, and we do it together." She nodded, feeling the weight and comfort of his words. Life in the mountains was not easy, but it was richer than anything she had known in the city. Here, every day had purpose, every effort had meaning, and every moment of connection brought joy. Spring continued to unfold, bringing new life to the valley. Flowers bloomed, trees budded, and the air was filled with the fresh scent of growth. The young woman tended the garden, now flourishing with vegetables and herbs. She felt a sense of pride in the small but vital role she played in maintaining their home. The man watched her with quiet admiration. He realized that her presence had transformed his life, bringing warmth, laughter, and companionship to a world that had once been silent and solitary. She, in turn, understood that he had offered her more than shelter. He had offered guidance, patience, and trust that allowed her to grow stronger, braver, and more confident. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, they sat outside enjoying the quiet. She rested her head on her hands, looking at the sky. "I never knew life could be like this," she said softly. "I never knew peace could feel so complete." He reached out and placed a hand over hers. "It is not just the mountains," he said. "It is how we live in them, together." She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She understood that this life, with its challenges and simplicity, had given her more than she could have imagined. She had found not just a home, but a sense of purpose and belonging. Winter storms, hard work, and quiet days had built a bond that was unshakable. They had faced challenges together, adapted to the mountain's demands, and learned to trust each other completely. The young woman felt a deep sense of gratitude for the man who had welcomed her, guided her, and shared his life with her. As the days passed, their connection remained steady, like the mountains themselves. They continued to work, learn, and grow, supporting each other in both small and meaningful ways. Life was simple, yet full. Each sunrise brought new opportunities, and each sunset brought reflection and calm. In the heart of the mountains, surrounded by nature's quiet beauty, they had found a rare and precious harmony. It was not a loud or dramatic happiness, but a deep, steady joy that came from shared effort, trust, and understanding. One morning, as the sun rose over the peaks, she stepped outside and breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. She looked at the house they had made together, the garden flourishing with new life, and the man tending the animals nearby. She felt a sense of pride and contentment unlike anything she had known. She walked over to him, smiling. "I'm glad I stayed," she said softly. He turned, smiling back. "So am I." The mountains stretched endlessly around them, silent witnesses to their shared life. The snow-capped peaks, the flowing river, and the quiet forest formed a world that was both challenging and beautiful. And within this world, they had created something even more remarkable, a life of purpose, trust, and quiet love. As spring fully arrived, they continued their work side by side, living each day with care and intention. Every meal cooked, every task completed, and every small gesture of kindness reinforced the deep bond they had built. The young woman realized that life did not have to be loud or crowded to be meaningful. Peace and fulfillment could be found in the quiet, steady rhythm of hard work, companionship, and shared trust. The man, too, understood that life was richer with her by his side. He had once thought solitude was enough, but he now knew that true strength and happiness came from connection, from sharing life with someone who understood and valued you. In the mountains, they had found more than survival. They had found harmony. They had found purpose. They had found each other. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light over the peaks and valleys, they stood together, ready to face whatever the mountains and life might bring, confident that together they could endure anything.